It's time now for State Your Case with George Korda on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. State Your Case is brought to you by Christian Healthcare Ministries. Now, here's your host, George Korda.
Welcome back to the second hour of State Your Case. I'm George Korda, the host. My guest this hour, making her mid-month visit, is Jamie Satterfield, the legal affairs writer. Did I do it right?
Yeah, I love the way you do it, George.
Oh, thank you.
It just makes my midweek. No, mid-month. That's what I am. I forget how many times you have me on.
For the News Sentinel, and there were big developments on something that she's been covering extensively, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But I've got who? Sam? Yeah. Sam wants to talk about something. Let me get this real quick. Hey, Sam.
Hello, George. How are you, sir?
Fine, thank you.
Good. I just heard the topic of the discussion, and I'm going to listen with great interest because that's an interesting topic. But when I called in, I wasn't sure what the topic was. But I had, since Ms. Satterfield is with the News Sentinel, for a long time, I had been very discouraged by the product that the News Sentinel is putting out, and I've never had a chance to talk to anybody really that's associated with the News Sentinel about it. But I've lived in this city for over 40 years, and I remember when there was a daily journal and a daily News Sentinel, both of which I consider to be excellent newspapers and fairly representative of the community. And then the journal went away, and from the time it did, it seemed to me that the News Sentinel began to evolve into not a paper that was, as most media outlets are, dedicated to representing their constituency, but dedicated to representing an ideology that is far different than the constituency. And to this point, in my opinion, and I'd like your comment and Ms. Satterfield's, in my opinion, the News Sentinel is a full-fledged, idealistic, liberal newspaper that occasionally has some right-leaning articles and commentary. I remember when anytime I would read Charlie D'Angelo's political or his political cartoon, it was almost always very interesting, and sometimes it was better than others, but it was almost never could you tell from his cartoons what ideology he was trying to push. He would go one way or the other, fairly with regularity or evenness, as political cartoonists are supposed to do. But now I gag when I read him. I don't hardly ever read the News Sentinel anymore, to be honest with you, but occasionally we'll go to the perspective page and look at the commentary. It's so left-leaning. It's so misrepresentative of this community.
Okay.
And I just wonder how come.
All right.
Well, let me very quickly address when you say you're looking at the perspective page. You're looking at a page that is dedicated to opinion, not news, and I think that people don't understand that as a basis. I am a news reporter, and so how I vote doesn't come into play to what I cover and how I cover it. I've heard that said about the Sentinel since I've been there, and I've been there since '94. I have voted Republican in every election since I turned 18, and I've never once been told at the Sentinel how to write and what to write about. That's a fact. So corporate control and what they put as ads and what they put on as opinion pieces and all that. My job is to report local news, and I feel like I do that well, and I feel like my colleagues do that well. I can't speak for the corporation that runs any news organization. And folks, we're all run by corporations. The news media is not a government institute. We are a private business. I appreciate that I get paid for what I do. No.
Well, when I was a newspaper reporter, I remember somebody being furious with the paper contacting the newspaper and saying, "I'm sick of my tax dollars going to pay for this kind of drivel."
And look, I pick up papers and other. I pick up newspapers in other places when I visit, and I might read something and not like the opinion stated in it, or I might not like the facts in it. But on a daily basis, politics just doesn't come into play with what I do. So that part of the media and criticism is foreign to me because I don't operate that way.
Well, another aspect of this, and it was true at the newspaper I worked for, which was in Florida. Our editorial page editor was a very fine guy named Nick White. And Nick would occasionally share with me letters to the editor he received, some calling him a right-wing conservative Nazi-like fanatic, and then another one where they were calling him Nikolai Whiteovich because he was such a liberal left-wing loon.
Yeah.
And he said, I think I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Here's kind of what I've learned over time, and that's this: that I'll give you another example because examples are good. One day I was working on a political campaign, a long time ago, and I went through the paper and I saw a story about the candidate for whom I was working, and I read it over and I said, ain't great. But it ain't bad. It's okay. It's like it was on page A6 or something. It's okay. Well, about a half hour later, I got a call from one of the close friends of the candidate screaming at me. I was consulting on the campaign. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? They're killing him. They're killing him. I said, what? He said, didn't you see the paper today? And I grabbed the paper and I started looking at it. I said, what story are you talking about? It's the same story I read. But he was sure that they were out to get him and kill him, and I read it, and I'm working on the. I'm ready. That's okay. It's all right, but it's not bad. When you see things that you don't like, you are much more likely to internalize and remember them than you are things that you like.
Absolutely.
And that's actually psychological studies have been done on that.
I get way more hate mail than I get way to go, girl. Yeah, it's just the way we are as humans. I do the same thing, so I'm not preaching.
So here's the thing. There's stuff in the I've got a column in the Sentinel. I don't. As last time I checked, I wasn't a card-carrying member of the progressive
And I will
movement.
say this, this community would be unaware today that more than 400 workers were poisoned in Kingston during the December 2008 spill at TVA Kingston fossil fuel plant. They would be unaware of that, but for the News Sentinel. So, there's value in local journalism.
Which is where we're going to that story in just a moment. Let me get this call. I think it's on the... Oh, he must have gotten off. Okay. Want to take the break right now? Okay, and then when we come back, we've got a call about the coal ash stuff. Awesome. And here are the numbers. If you have a comment or a question about anything Miss Satterfield has done or is alleged to have done.
That's right. I plead that fifth.
656-8255, pound 987, straight-in call on U.S. Cellular, toll-free 800-951-8255.
See, that makes me want to get my lighter out and flick it. Start that waving back and forth. Do kids even do that anymore? I took my kids when they were younger. They do their cell phones. Yeah, I was like, what is this?
Is that the Eagles?
And then you have to go, woo! Or something.
Yeah, like something. All right, welcome back to State Your Case. I'm George Korda. This is News Talk 98.7, the News and Talk of East Tennessee. We are speaking with, the Imperial are speaking with Jamie Satterfield, who is the legal affairs, editor, writer.
Just all around wonderful human being. I don't know.
Yeah, all of those things. You find it on our website.
Can you lie and say I look like Julia Roberts?
And so we're talking to her too. But I gotta talk about. What do I gotta talk about? Oh yeah,
not the show.
All right, now I'm going to read the lead.
Drum roll, please.
Of your story. All right, I can do that actually. Hold on.
Well, last time I was here, you were having Wi-Fi issues or something. I'm glad that your wife took care of that.
Hey, I'm gonna teach you something about drumming here. Listen to this. I'm digressing.
Yeah, of course.
Listen to this.
George, I digress, Korda.
What is this?
A drum roll.
That's just me whacking my hands on the table.
I see.
Now, if I add accents to it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm digging that.
What is that?
It sounds sort of African.
It's Wipeout.
Oh, yes.
See? So, I have no idea why I went there.
I don't either. I was waiting.
You said drum roll.
I was waiting for the segue.
You said drum roll. This is a value-added show. I'm trying to explain to people. All you do, you add accents.
They do have medicine for the ADD thing.
Squirrel! Okay. All right, let me read.
Read.
I will. I can't work under this kind of pressure. A federal jury on Wednesday ruled a global contractor tasked with keeping disaster cleanup workers safe instead endangered them, some fatally. This was Jamie's story on what happened with the coal ash issue that she's been talking about for some time. So fill in the blanks here.
So 7.6 million tons of coal ash was coming down in Roane County, threatening to wipe out houses, cars, roads. It was wiping out all of those things. And heavy equipment operators were the first responders. They jumped on dozers, trackhoes, whatever it took, and they got it contained. And then they went to work cleaning it up. And what this jury ruled this week was that the company, Jacobs Engineering, that TVA put in charge of this cleanup site, including keeping the workers safe, that they lied to them about the dangerous coal ash, that they refused them protective gear, that they tampered with testing that was designed to make sure they were safe, and that they, as a result of Jacobs Engineering's negligence and conduct, and that these workers were poisoned. That's the bottom line. Now, what's sad is that doesn't get these workers a thing. All that does is get them another trial where now they can come in and they can say, here's specifically how long I was in ash without protection, and here's my medical issues, and then a jury would then be asked what would be the appropriate damages for that. So a big win for the workers, but they are at this moment still where they were a day before, dying. Many of them don't have medical insurance. Some of them are too sick to work now. Their families are sick. One of these workers, I met his son, I think he's 7. The kid can't hardly breathe. He has to have all kinds of breathing treatments because Daddy, unaware, because of Jacobs Engineering and TVA, frankly, brought this stuff home, and that kid breathed it, and now he's got breathing issues. You know, so the goal here really is justice for these people. What that looks like, I think not only the courts are going to decide that, but I think that our community needs to decide that. They were first responders, no different than firefighters and cops who rushed into the Twin Towers, because cops and firefighters couldn't do anything against that coal ash. If they didn't know how to drive a bulldozer, they were of no help. So these men and women who responded are our first responders. And this Christmas, Mike Shelton's widow, her name's Angie, he died 6 months after he left this work site from brain cancer as a result of coal ash exposure. That woman can barely pay her bills. And the workers who themselves all are struggling as a result of them being poisoned, they are going to raise money for this woman. But they're not going to tell her, I'm spoiling this, but they're going to tell her that it's just to honor her husband, because that's the type of people they are. They won't come on the air and tell you they're suffering. I have to do that, and I choose to do that. It's awful what's happened to them, And in my mind, this is a victory, but it's not a resolution. They need medical care. Some of these folks can't even afford to get tested, let alone treated.
So there's no fund that's been set up yet?
No.
Will you let me know when there is?
Yeah. Honestly, as a reporter, my job is to tell the story, but that needs to be done. Rome County should stand up now that these folks have the power of a verdict behind them. Rome County ought to stand up and say, we're going to honor these folks. However they do it is up to them. But, I've been reporting on this for over 2 years, and I'm watching these people die in front of me, and it's wrong. And it could have been prevented. Could have been prevented. There was a plan in place to protect them, and it wasn't followed. And the EPA, which was in charge of that cleanup operation, failed those workers as well. And I would like Lamar Alexander to call for an investigation, top down, what happened and why, so it doesn't happen again. There are workers every day working in coal ash in this country. Every day.
It says here that in your story, TVA ratepayers paid Jacobs Engineering more than $64 million?
Yeah, $64 million. TVA, this is what I love. Love in a bad way. TVA said to Jacobs Engineering, get it done quickly and quietly. And if you get it done quickly and quietly, and you don't report any worker injuries, we're going to give you another $1 million more.
Well, if you don't report any injuries.
Yes.
Is that legit? I mean,
it was in the contract.
If you don't report anywhere, isn't that against the law?
No, it's called non-reportable injuries. That was the language in the contract. I saw it myself.
What constitutes a non-reportable injury?
Well, there was testimony about that. Certainly, a worker saying they can't breathe apparently wasn't a reportable injury because workers started complaining about 5 years in, unfortunately, when they started realizing it was the coal ash. You can't find a worker that was exposed in Kingston who does not have scarring on their skin, George. Now, where did that come from? I have met hundreds of them so far. There were 900 total. 400 is really what we're talking about in the most dangerous part of the work site. They all have various skin ailments, but scarring from that ash. And then they all have breathing issues. Most of them have blood disorders. These are common ailments that have all been linked to what's in coal ash. So there's no doubt they were poisoned. No doubt. And like I say.
But so now did the workers have to sue a second time?
Essentially, it's a two, and lawyers can better address that than me, but it's because it's a toxic tort lawsuit. You first have to prove general causation, which is what they did. And then the next phase becomes specific causation. So they're not guaranteed to win the second.
So this is going on another 2 more years with no resolution.
Yeah. And meanwhile, again, these people are suffering. The lucky ones are the ones that maybe did some work at Oak Ridge or maybe has a wife. Most of these are men. Some of them are women, though, but they have a spouse who has insurance. But, there was a worker that was following me on Facebook, and he came down for a couple of days of the trial, and he was showing me his skin, and no insurance. No insurance.
Okay, we got a caller who wants to ask about this, but we got to take this break first. And then Senator Alexander will be calling. I don't know, Jamie, that I've got a limited time with him. But I will follow up with him. That I will do.
I'm going to be asking those questions of our leaders in the week ahead.
I would, here Tim Burchett's probably
absolutely
available to listen to you. I bet he will. Welcome back. State Your Case. I'm George Korda, your host. This is News Talk 98.7, the news and talk of East Tennessee. All right, so we got him on? Okay. Senator, you there?
Oh, hey, George. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm great.
Well, thank you for calling. I appreciate this.
No, I'm glad to do it. Good to talk with you.
Okay, I got a couple of things. I know we got just a few minutes here, but first of all, would love to get your observations on Tuesday night's election.
Well, it was half good. Karl Rove wrote that it was like an 8th grade soccer match. Everybody goes home with a ribbon. So we Republicans are happy because we've got 52 to 54 seats, and that, with the president, gives us a chance to keep our agenda on lower taxes, lower regulations, more conservative judges. We can continue to do that. But the House of Representatives is Democratic, so that's a win for the Democrats.
Now, in comparison to, for example, Bill Clinton's first midterm, Barack Obama's first midterm, this isn't any kind of the drubbing that Democrats took in those midterms. Are you taking away anything from that?
Well, it's hard to. I was elected in 2002 the first time, and that was George W. Bush's, first election after he came in 2000, and we regained the Senate majority that year in the Senate. So while it's usually true that the president loses after 2 years, it's not always true. But I think President Trump can take heart in the fact that in the races like Tennessee, where we kept seats or gained seats, that he was a positive factor.
Now, the unfolding drama in Florida, this is not the first time that area has been an issue, and there's some things popping up here and there, excuse me, around the country now. Oh, look, we've got more ballots. Gee, nobody saw these ballots before now.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, is there anything legislatively that can be done to say, look, either at the state or the federal level, say, look, here's the way this works. Every ballot in possession of the Election Commission by, I'm going to make this up, 2 hours after the polls close are the ballots that are going to be counted. And if you're going to show up with ballots a day or two later and say, oh, we've got more that nobody knew about, if you're the election supervisor, you got a price to pay for that. It just seems like almost the opportunity for mail-order fraud.
Yeah, it seems like it. Of course, in Florida, it seems like in an election, if you put a peach up against an orange, it'd be 50-50, and it'd be a close race. I think the fact is that our elections in the United States are fair and honest, with rare exceptions, and there has been a lot done state by state, and the federal government has poured in extra money to help the states make their elections transparent and fair since the Bush versus Gore thing in the year 2000. So if we find something out of this year that needs to be done, then we should do it. But I don't favor the federal government taking over all the rules on elections. I think that leads to more chances for fraud.
All right, several years ago, when I was in your office asking you what are your plans, just as you were becoming chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, you said, I want to get rid of this national school board idea.
Right.
And in fact, I mentioned this on Channel 6 today, that the reason nobody talks about Common Core was such a huge issue. And I said the reason nobody talks about Common Core anymore is because of Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander, who got it out of the federal government's playbook and sent that kind of authority back to the states.
That's exactly right.
And so my question is, that was a big win. What, going into this new session of Congress that's going to be coming up in January, what goals do you have in this environment?
Well, higher education, to make sure college education is worth it for students. Second, lower health care costs, not just health insurance. You're not going to have cheaper health insurance until you have cheaper health care. Heard you talking about that just before I came on. And then I think the president should take on immigration. I've said to President Trump on several occasions, Mr. President, you can do Nixon to China on immigration. I thought we passed a bill in the Senate in 2013 that would have solved almost all the problems that we talk about today. But if President Trump worked in a bipartisan way with Congress to create a legal immigration system, give status where it's appropriate, and secure the border, then I think the American people would buy it. So that's what I hope we tackle.
The issue that has been much discussed is the divide, not only in the country, but in Washington. Is it getting harder to be bipartisan, or is the bipartisan effort just not being something that anybody focuses on?
Well, I think it's the latter. Let me give you an example. I suggest to people that you look at Washington, D.C. as a split-screen television. Take the 30 days from October 6th, when Judge Kavanaugh's hearing started, to November 6th, when he was confirmed. The whole country was transfixed by that. That's about as acrimonious as you could possibly be in the Senate. But over on the other side of the Capitol, here's what was happening. We had 72 senators who worked together, both parties, to pass a landmark opioids bill, which affects every community, and that's our biggest public health epidemic. For the first time in a generation, we changed the copyright laws so songwriters get paid a fair market value for when their songs are paid online. We passed appropriations bills on time and on budget for the fourth consecutive year. We fund the Office of Science, for example, which funds Oak Ridge National Laboratory at record levels, supercomputing at record levels, and biomedical research at record levels. We even got out of committees in both houses of Congress a bill to pay for half the maintenance of the national parks, and we passed a bill to ban cell phone calls on airplanes. Now, those are just the bills I was working on. And there was other legislation that was equally important for people. So while on one side of the screen you had Kavanaugh, on the other side you had opioids, national parks, supercomputing, Chickamauga Lock, Oak Ridge Laboratory, and other legislation. So we're getting those things done. In fact, we've had a very productive 2 years. But you have to want to see it, and when a plane crashes, it's news. When it doesn't crash, it's not news, and problem solving is not news most of the time, because when we solve the problems, we work things out, and most people vote for it, and it lasts a long time as a result.
So you're now going to be the senior senator from Tennessee. I mean, you're not going to be the Tennessee senator. I want to rephrase what I was about to say. Who's chairman of a committee, it's called the HELP Committee, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. That covers a really broad portfolio.
Yep.
And so where do you see yourself being the most valuable to the people who are listening to this show over the next 2 years till 2020?
Well, sometimes things that aren't in my committee I can work on. For example, I talked to the president the other night about putting high on his agenda this bill to pay for all, get rid of half the maintenance cost in the national parks, which would be great for the Smokies. And he said to me he wanted to work on infrastructure in the new Congress, and asked me to think about how to do that. So that's not my committee, but if the president wants to work on it, he asked me to help him do it, then I'm going to think about it. But in our committee, number one, higher education, make sure that it's easier and simpler to go to college, and people can afford it, and the degree they get is worth what they pay for it. Number two, lower health care costs. As I mentioned earlier, we need to deal with pensions. That doesn't sound like a sexy issue, but we've got lots of people whose pensions aren't in good shape, and they're going to end up in retirement without anything to live on, and we need to deal with that in the next 2 years.
All right, well, I know that pretty much runs out our time that I had agreed to with your staff.
Let me mention one other thing.
You go ahead.
If you've got 60 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
A couple of things to be thankful for. The Foothills Parkway opened yesterday, and for any of your listeners who haven't driven it, I recommend they do. Honey and I drove it today, and it is the most beautiful drive in America, I think. It's by far the best view of the Smokies, and that's the first good thing. And the second good thing is you can see the mountains because the air is cleaner. When I was elected in 2002, you could see 9 miles because of the smoggy air. Today it's 36 miles because of the work of a lot of people, but that includes federal regulations on clean air. It includes TVA putting pollution control equipment on its coal plants. It's still operating many of the plants, but they don't have sulfur, nitrogen, and mercury coming out of them now. As a result, we can see the Smokies. So that's something to be thankful for as we get to Thanksgiving, that both those things have happened. And for those who think the government doesn't get anything done, I think they'd be pretty pleased with both those things, the Foothills Parkway and being able to see the mountains.
All right. Well, Senator Lamar Alexander, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, George. And I look forward to talking with you again.
Well, I'm going to be in Washington sometime in the next few months, and I'm get with your staff and see if we can have another chat.
You come by whenever you want.
All right. Thanks a lot. Right. Senator Lamar Alexander, and I am going to follow up on it.
I'm going to be on you about it. See how good I was? I just kept quiet over here.
I told you.
Saw me shadowboxing a little.
I told you I would, and I will.
Because he didn't mention labor, that L in the help.
Health is in there, too.
Yeah.
Do I need to talk about somebody? All right. We'll be back right after this to start taking calls with Jamie Satterfield right here on State Your Case.
You know, George, when you're gone, I sing sometimes. And your show's still on the air, so
that may be the only thing keeping it. That may be the saving grace.
Yeah.
Welcome back to State Your Case. I'm George Korda. Jamie Satterfield is here. We're talking principally about the coal ash.
Yeah, that's been my big news of the week. Hey, George, I was on NPR.
Say what? Okay.
William.
Yeah, I saw your social media post.
Yeah, I felt real hippie-ish.
NPR.
I thought from Korda to NPR.
What did you do when you went on?
Who can call me an ideologue, right?
See, if you're talking NPR, you have to do it like you have to. Good evening.
I had to get the redneck out of my voice.
Thank you.
It's hard to do.
Thank you for allowing me to speak on this substantive issue. All right, we got it. William wants to talk about this subject. William, you're on State Your Case.
Hey, Jamie.
Yes.
Redneck was not out of your voice. I assure you.
I am what I am.
Hey, listen, but I was listening Friday afternoon, and there you were, and they gave you plenty of time. You explained it just like you have on in the TV and not TV, but the radio here and the newspaper. And a question for me is, why didn't you've been great about it? You've been on it like a mad dog, basically, going after a bone. And I congratulate you on that. And why hasn't local TV news been on this?
Well, I saw that a few of them picked up the verdict, and I was happy about that. But I don't know. I think it wasn't an easy story. I spent 6 months just doing the grunt work, reading the entire EPA record. That was not fun. Yeah. I went out to the side. George, I got to tell you the story real quick. I played Aaron Brockovich. I was in a skirt, and I get all out there where the old, coal ash spill site was, and I thought, I'm going to dig down and find some coal ash. I didn't have a shovel with me. But anyway, I don't know. I think that part of it is that it was a story that was hidden. And I'm really grateful that Gannett gave me time to investigate it. But I want everybody paying attention to this. I am convinced that there are still workers across this country who may be sick and don't realize that there is litigation going on. There may be some that don't necessarily connect their illness to that spill because they've had jobs in the meantime. This coal ash gets in their bodies, and it takes time. It builds up. This long-term exposure is the problem with these workers. But, some of them started getting sick while they were out there, but some of them got a little bit of sickness, but it's gotten progressively worse. So the more media reporting on it, the better. And also for change.
Yeah, please stay on it if you could. I'm a Roane County resident, and I've known some people that have been personally affected by this, and we really appreciate what you've done.
Well, I'm honored to do it. These workers, to me, were as I've said many times, they were first responders, and they need to be honored that way.
I was just looking. You mentioned during a break, I think it was, that Jacobs Engineering had run into some trouble in China, and I looked up, this is from the South China Post, and the headline is, U.S. firm banned from bidding for Hong Kong contracts for 1 year following bridge arrests. So apparently
I think it's 21 Jacobs staffers arrested because for lying about strength testing on concrete. So think about that, folks. They're building a bridge and telling these folks, this concrete is strong enough to take this much tonnage, and they weren't even testing it, or they were lying about it. And we had the same sort of allegation here in terms of the testing of the exposure level of these workers, that there was tampering and lying. We had a Jacobs Engineering, the safety manager, admitted he lied to these workers. He thought it was funny. He thought that these workers were so dumb. I mean, that's really his attitude. Well, yeah, I told them they could eat a pound of it a day, but who believes that? Like they were stupid. Well, I'm sorry. These are guys who operate dozers and trackhoes, and they are expecting you to tell them, Jacobs, what's in coal ash and what's safe and what's not.
Well, also in the South China Post, it says the consultancy firm is part of U.S.-based Jacobs Engineering Group, which employs 54,000 people worldwide and netted $10.9 billion last year.
Yeah, and these people are without health insurance and without, any way to make sure that they and their to me, these folks ought for the rest of their lives never have to work or worry about health insurance and health cost. They paid a price for our community. Now, whether that's Jacobs or our own community, I don't know, but I feel strongly about that.
How long have you been working on this?
Well, I started in early 2017, and I'm still going because I think there's more to this. I think we've really only scratched the surface. The workers could only sue Jacobs, but let's remember who hired Jacobs, and that was TVA. And who had safety managers out on that site? TVA. Who had cameras? Videos, George, are missing that TVA was required by court order to maintain, and those videos, and that would have shown the conditions the workers were working in. They're gone, and TVA won't say where they are. Are they missing? Have you moved them? Do they exist? And this is what kills me. If that were the city of Knoxville, I could file request and I could use the power of the law to get that information. But because it's TVA, on one hand they get quasi-governmental protection, but on the other hand they get to operate like a private business. They don't have to answer anything.
All right, we'll talk about this more next time you're on. How much time do we have? All right, it's a point of personal privilege then, because today is Veterans Day, and I want to reach out and say thank you to the people who have served. There are fewer and fewer Americans who know what it means to serve in the military forces. I'm always very clear on this. I served for 5 years and 7 months, getting on close to 6 years in the U.S. Army, active duty. I never did anything. I was in between wars. I never had to look at the business end of an AK-47 and wonder if there was a bullet with my name on it. I just didn't have to do that. And I'm not complaining. But I served with a lot of guys who did in Vietnam. And there have been a lot of folks who have served in combat and in dangerous situations since then. And it troubles me a little bit that so few Americans now fully appreciate what it means to be in the military, but I'm also moved by the fact that Americans now, as opposed to that time during Vietnam, there's a level of respect and gratitude to the military that I think is very good for the country. So happy Veterans Day to all of my fellow veterans. And
same here, George. Same here. Many of my coal ash workers are also veterans.
All right. Woo! Thank you, Jamie. This is George Korda. We'll be back next week on State Your Case.